Manager of the Massachusetts Veterans Memorial Cemetery here in Agawam. On behalf of the Department of Veteran Services, our cemetery staff, our volunteers, the United States Air Force Honor Guard, we welcome you to this hallowed ground. Hallowed ground that has been dedicated to the real patriots and true heroes of our nation. The hero that we honor today, peacetime veteran, United States Air Force Airman First Class, George E. Swanson. The Department of Veterans Affairs in Washington, D.C., as well as the Department of Veteran Services in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, has given us the responsibility and indeed the honor to care for these grounds, and we promise to faithfully do so. It is our intent to make every day Veterans Day. On behalf of the Department of Veteran Services, our cemetery staff, our volunteers, and the United States Air Force Honor Guard, we extend our most sincere condolences to the family and friends of Airman First Class George E. Swanson.
We're gathered here today to say our goodbye to George. But before we continue, there are two people who are not here that predeceased George, Joanne and Steve, who was buried here. So I would like us to just bow our heads for a few seconds in remembrance of them before we continue. Thank you. George was born about 15 months before me, and he and I spent 16, 17 years together, for we shared the same bedroom. And so there were many things that were talked about and discussed, but one thing we never did, we never fought. I can never remember a time where we had any type of physical fight. One of the reasons was probably because we had a secret code between us, that when one was irking the other, we would just say one word. If he was bothering me, I would look at him and say, Everett. And if I was doing something that bothered him, he would look at me and say, Eugene. And because of that, we couldn't say anything else. We'd just stand there and laugh. George, even at a young age, was set to have his way most of the time. There could be all his brothers and sisters out playing or doing something, and if he had his mind to do something, he did it. At a young age, one of his biggest hobbies was airplane modeling making. Not such as you see today that comes in just a few pieces, but in those times it came in very small pieces of wood that you had to painstakingly put together. And he did that and then covered it with paper, and it would be hanging in the ceiling. And God forbid anybody that would touch it. In high school, he and his guitar were partners. He was a member of the high school chorus for 4 years, and he was a soloist in all those 4 years. And his favorite music, as I'm sure most of you know, was country and western. And his favorite singer happened to be Hank Williams Sr. So every solo he gave was either Cheating Heart or Cold, Cold World. When George was a freshman in high school, he tried out for the baseball and basketball teams, but he didn't make it. But Coach Rickson asked him to be the official scorekeeper for basketball and baseball, which he did for 4 years. I played basketball, and I would have to report to the official scorer before he before they would let me go into the game. And he, when there was a timeout or something, or stoppage in play, he would notify the referee that a sub was coming in. And he would always say, "You're in, brother." And one time I remember especially, it was in a tournament game, and he was the official scorer. And I went in, and as I was going into the game, I heard him turn to somebody and say, "That's my brother." And it has always stuck with me. George was into physical education. Many times in high school, the boys would have a physical examination where we would be tested on how many sit-ups, how many push-ups, how many jumping jacks, and how many pull-ups we could do in a certain amount of time. And then at the end, when all the boys were tested, the results were put on a board. And I would go up and look, and I'd go look up and down, down, further and further, and there I would be. But every time I looked at number 1 or number 2, it said George Swanson. And he took great pride in that he was able to always be in the number 1 or 2 boy in the whole class, in the whole school, I should say. And there was one instance that I remember, and my sister Ingrid brought it up also to me. In our schedule for varsity basketball game, there was one game every year against the faculty. And they had a separate group of cheerleaders. They were all boys. You had to be a boy. So at this particular game, before the game, the cheerleaders came out. They were not dressed in regular uniforms, but they came out dressed in old grain sack, the burlap bags, with a hole cut in the head and hole cut in for the arms. And they had to perform all the cheers that the regular cheerleaders had to do. One of those members, some of us knew was Lori Long, but the head cheerleader was George, dressed in his burlap bag. After school, we know that he joined the service and spent a number of years traveling, settling in Spain, there where he met his first wife, Tilly. And after that, the family started coming along. George is no longer with us. We miss him, and we will miss him. But George, we would like to say this: may you rest in peace, and we will see you again in the big house. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil.